So this is the one book that I've almost never heard even Rav Ginsburg give a single class on, and any of these. And there's a ton of stuff here.
Why not?
That I don't know. I don't know why he hasn't really discussed this. And as I was going through it, I found some of the stuff that I thought was like this original findings that he only told me, he never told it to anybody. And suddenly I read it in here, it's in black and white, he wrote it a long time ago. If anybody would open, they would find it. Something in mathematics that I really thought was unique, that I was the only person in the world that had ever heard it from. It's in here. So this book is about love, and the most important thing here, which really guides the first few chapters, is this chart, which I'll tell you about in a second.
It's not here.
So it's like how the Rav does everything, which is yeah, I will, but I need to translate it, and it wasn't in Avram Aryeh's things, so it's not so important for this class.
It, not all of us.
I'll just tell you in short that the word love in Hebrew is Aleph Hey Bet Hey, right, and it's equal to 13. So it's befitting.
It's not.
Ahava. So it's befitting that there are 13 types of love. Yeah. So that's not so, when you think about it, it's not such a big chiddush. Why? Because the way that we understand the sfirot, so most people understand there's only 10 sfirot, right? Only 10 emanations. But in Chassidus, we usually discuss 13. How do we get to 13? Because we add in the keter itself, in the crown, you know that we have 3 heads. So those 3, they can be 3 more. So then it'll be Chokhmah, Binah, and Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut, and those 3. Oh, welcome back. And the other option is, as it is here, is that in the crown there's only 2, which is the classic way that it's usually described. There's the inner aspect of the crown and the outer external aspect of the crown. And then, here in Malchus, he divides Malchus into two parts, which would basically be saying that there's the mind of Malchus and then there's the rest of the Sfirot of Malchus itself. So that's a little technical, it doesn't matter. But what I do want to take from this chart right now, not to go, not to fit everything in its place, but just to mention what they are. So there's 2 types of what we call essential, you would call it love. Or, again, there's no word in English, we've discussed it a lot of times, atzmi, something that is the thing in and of itself, right? Without any reference to anything else, as it is. So essential is mahut, it's not atzmi, it's less than that. There's a word in Greek, it was never translated into English, I don't know what to do.
Core?
Yeah, whatever you want. So those 2
Essence. It's not essence.
are the love between the Eibishter, between Hashem and the Jewish people. There's 2 types of relationship. There's Hashem as what we call the creator and how he relates to us. And then he's like the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And then as the Kadosh Baruch Hu, he's like the male and we're the female. So there it's more like the type of love that you would expect. But in the Malchus, there's another type of love between Hashem and us, and that's the love of a king to his nation, which is a little bit different. It's not the same thing as a husband and wife. Why? Because when you're talking about a nation, the nation is not just, for instance, husband and wife. The husband doesn't think, normally, hopefully, he doesn't think about the wife as somebody who's serving him. He thinks it's true that she brings into fruition his inner self, meaning the offspring. She's the one who makes it into a reality. And without his wife, he could never have children. So from that respect, she does take his potential and make it something actual. But he doesn't think about her as like serving him in that respect. In fact, what does it look like? It looks more like we're doing it together, right? There's two partners here, and Hashem adds the soul, and that's the offspring. That's the house that we build, or like the Shechina between them, which is like the third part also. But when it comes to a king, meaning a leader, and the people, there is such a thing that each one is serving the other. It's like it's a service mentality, meaning the king is somebody, or the leader is somebody, anybody who deals as a public figure. He's supposed to give up his personal life in order to serve the public. That's why they call it a public servant. From their point of view, if the leader is really somebody who has a vision, then the people are serving the vision. Meaning they might take their personal visions and coalesce it, like make it part of this larger picture of where the leader is going. This is something that today would be called fascism. It's very hard for today people to understand this. But there's also a positive aspect to this. Meaning there's a lot of things that couldn't be done unless a lot of people get together and go and do this. So whether we like it or not, for instance, we're all part of the Zionistic vision. Whether we like it or not, it doesn't matter if you're for Zionism, you're against Zionism, you live in Mea Shearim, you live somewhere else. Everybody's part of it. Why? Because this is the vision that right now is driving the people here in Eretz Yisrael in the end. It's to build a country. Is it something spiritual? Is it not something spiritual? We can argue from now till the end of time. But the vision is like to take a land that was relatively desolate, like all the Middle East, nothing special here, and turn it into a pkak. Right. That's what they had in their mind. They want to turn into one big traffic jam. But part of turning it into a traffic jam was that Waze came out of these same people, right? That we're going to beat traffic completely, going to get rid of it. They have this whole new project how they're going to get completely rid of traffic. In any case, you add your personal, meaning the people today are pursuing something more personal even, and individualistic, and yet a lot is being built because of that. It's like even the model today in a modern society is that the government is not the one that's supposed to build the public works. You actually hand out licenses, meaning you grant whatever company comes in and actually builds the public works, whatever it is, you grant them a license to charge for it for 20 years or 30 years, and that way you get stuff built because somebody wants to make a profit, not even because you want to service the public. So there's a lot of interaction between the general vision and what people's personal vision is. So those are the altogether they make up 4 types of love here. Okay. Then there's the intellectual love. We don't even normally think about this thing, but there's intellectual love. And unfortunately, it's almost people are afraid to go into that space, or they don't recognize that something is happening. What is this? This is what we call the love of a Rav to a student. And on the other hand, the love of a student towards his Rav. And then, apart from those 2 types of love, one going in one direction, one going in the other, there's the love between the students themselves, which is called Dibuk Chaverim. In fact, this one is so important, the love between the students, that the Arizal said to his students that the reason that I wasn't able to bring Mashiach in my generation was because you didn't love each other enough. You didn't have enough cohesion. You didn't become one unit like you should have. The Rebbe had a similar concept when he used to say that the word immediately, miyad in Hebrew, right, was an acronym. Right, you used to say the Mashiach should come techef umiyad mamash, right, immediately. And how do you say it in Hebrew? So it's techef umiyad. There's 2 words. I don't know how to say it. It's like techef is right now. Techef, taf kaf pei, techef umiyad. Immediately, meaning right now and immediately. In Hebrew, it's a phrase, techef umiyad. And then he added bamash into it. So he explained that the word miyad, immediately, it even sounds the same, I think. Miyad is mem yud daled, and immediate, right? You hear the mid in it. Maybe it's even in front of So he explained, it wasn't very many times, he explained this a couple of times. And mem yud daled, he saw it as an acronym for Moshe, Yoshua, Doram, which means their generation. What was the idea? The idea was that the same people who were cohesive under Moshe in his generation should be able, their cohesion, how they're connected to each other, should be strong enough to carry over to the next leader, to Yoshua. And if the generation feels at any one point that it can switch leaders and can go from one to the next without breaking apart, because they're so connected, they go together. Like everybody, what does it mean that we go to greet the Mashiach together? What's the idea behind that concept? That there has to be enough cohesion between the students, meaning between the Jewish people, between us and ourselves, that when this new leader suddenly shows up, it's not the picture that people have, that at first he'll have 10 followers, then he'll have 100, then he'll have 1,000, then he'll have 10,000, then 1,000,000. No, it's that everybody en masse, everybody together as a group suddenly recognizes that this is the new leader, this is the person. And it's a very powerful image, and it can only come from the fact that we're cohesive as a group. That we're, no matter what, we don't fall apart. So even if there's a new leader, so we either adopt him together or we don't at all. But you locally. So that's like the idea of the strength of the group in determining how much the leader can lead to any kind of geula, any kind of redemption. It depends on the strength of the people, the strength of the students. So that's in the intellect.
That's what the Rebbe said about the ticket from the
And the Moshe, Yoshua, Doram. There's a lot of explanations of what it means. But, He also said it's Menachem, Yosef, and Dov. That's also 3 generations of him, his father-in-law, and his father-in-law's father. So in any case, this was the idea of that the cohesion of the students is what allows the Rav to become something higher. Why did I say that this is something that we don't think about? Because you don't usually express this love in the sense of, it's not like between a husband and wife, and it's not even like between us and Hashem, where you daven every day and you express your connection, and you say Ahavat Olam Ahavtanu, and you say that you Hashem love us and we love you. The relationship between a Rav and a student is not one that's usually expressed. It's very intellectual. But you have to understand that it's just as powerful. The attraction, why is one person attracted to this Rav and the other one is not? Because it's love. There's chemistry. Like it fits, it works for me. And when it does, so there's all kinds of sayings that I don't want to say now, but it's better than a lot of stuff. When it really touches you. And that's what you feel. You feel inseminated when you learn with that person. You feel that it's like he's inseminating your mind. Like he's inseminating the way that you see things. And it grows in you, meaning if you think about it afterwards, meaning you remain pregnant with what was said, so that's a sign that there is real connection here. Okay? And for the Rav, it's like a question of, does that student, or group of students, whatever, cause me afterwards to go home and rethink everything? Meaning, do they fertilize me, my thoughts, the way that I see things, the way that I need to explain things, and so on? Okay. That means that there's cross-fertilization, that it's going back and forth, that you feel pregnant with the interaction, that it causes you to do something more afterwards, and it might give birth in the end, hopefully, to actual children, which is action. And that it's not just that I learned and it was very powerful and so on and so forth, but that there was an uvechen, that there's also a practical product from what happened. Okay. The next category of love is the emotive love. And that obviously is mostly found between husband and wife.
What did you say, mode or motive?
Emotive,
Motive.
emotional. But, as we'll see in a moment, these categories, they can also be extended a little bit in a different direction. You'll see in a moment. It's not just between husband and wife. The emotive love goes in another direction also. We'll see in a moment. Then, in emotive love, there's also love between friends, between good friends. It's also emotional. That's why friends kiss and hug, like almost like they're married. And if you can, right, exactly. It can go to the level where it's even, it could be higher than even the love between that person has with his wife. It doesn't consume in the same way, but it's very powerful. So, like for instance, before I was married before I was married. I was married to my roommate, who I lived with for 5 years. So we were like married. Everything we did together, went to the same show, went to the same place, and we lived together. So in a certain sense, you get this feeling like, okay, it's how, as close as it can become between two people. Then there's the natural love, what we call the habitual love, the nehi, netzach yesod, the love that relates to that. And that's the love between parents and children and parents, and between siblings. Right? All the love in the family, not between the mother and father, but between everything that extends from there. So the parents, the way they love their children is natural love. It never goes away. And even the love between children and parents never goes away, even though it can be broken, completely broken. That's why we put it in hod. Hod is always where all the breakage, right, all the carnage happens in the hod, in the acknowledgement. Like the left limb where Yaakov Avinu was hurt by Esav's malach. That's the hod. Tamimut. Tamimut means to be whole, and the first place to be broken is there, that it's not completely whole. But then there's also the brotherly love between brother and sister, and brother and sister even, which always remains constant throughout life. It remains the same way. It can go up and down in terms of how much it's revealed, but at its essence it doesn't change. There's no times that it's more or less. Okay, so that in general is one way of describing all the different types of love. So obviously the one that's going to interest us the most is the love of husband and wife. But the truth has to be said that you can't really have one of these and not have the others. Meaning the faculty of love in the person is one. It's just expressed in all these different ways. So if it works, if your love is flowing, and it's affecting other people, and it's affecting you, and it's creating the relationships in your life. First of all, you create your relationship with Hashem, then your relationship with your teachers, with your classmates, again, with the other people that you're learning with. It's a very interesting thing that, it exists outside the Jewish world, but maybe it doesn't exist enough inside the Jewish world that even if, I'm not crazy about the Kola model of life, where a person doesn't work at all, but even when a person is working, and he has to have a group of people that, it might change during his life, but that they all designate somebody who's the teacher, whoever it is, and they participate together in whatever it's part of being alive. It's like, for a Jew, we call this the love of Torah. This whole thing of the love between teacher and student and teacher and students between themselves, it all falls under the love of Torah. So if Torah is an issue in your life, you can't sit alone, really. It's not that you don't. You also sit together. You sit alone, and you read a book, and whatever it is. But the learning is meant to be a social experience. It's not meant to be something that, it's not the model of the academic world, where you sit in a library and you're all alone with whatever you're doing. That's not Torah. That's exactly the whole idea, that it's not Torah. It could be the deepest, smartest, whatever type of thoughts, equations, problems you're solving, whatever. That's not Torah. Torah was given in mass. It was given to all of us together. And it's studied. It has to be studied in a group. How do you study in a group? So there's all kinds. There's two different types of group. One group is where there's a Rav and students, and the other group, which is just as important, and in fact, the Friediger Rebbe says that the bracha that most of the world make, what's the bracha that most of the world make on Torah? They say la'asok b'divrei Torah. In Chabad we say al divrei Torah, just without saying la'asok. But that's the nusach of the Arizal. But most of the world says la'asok b'divrei Torah. It says, what does it mean la'asok b'divrei Torah? That's dibuk chavirim. That's the type of Torah that's learned in a group, without a Rav. Nobody has to be the Rav. It's just that people get together and they discuss something in Torah. So most people, to discuss something in Torah, you have to know what you're talking about. So in our generation, it just means that people get together and they read a text between them, whatever it is, and they discuss what they just read. And that's part of being. That's what it means to have a community. That's how a Jewish community is built. It should be built around love of Torah, meaning that why are we joining together? And the amazing thing is that that the non-from world has discovered this, and as the world becomes more and more, screen-oriented, where it's not just that you're alone if you go into a library, you're alone even if you're on the street or at home, wherever it is. So the need for community becomes stronger. And so now you've got all these incredible learning groups. So they don't share my outlook on what Torah is, but they get together to do what? So it used to be that they're, Dead Poet Society. So they got together to read some old prose or old poetry. Now they get together in Israel. There's a lot of places like this that non-from people get together. And what do they get together? To learn, to discuss something in Torah. So sometimes they invite a speaker, and then it's like a Rav and Talmidim. But most of the time they get together to just discuss. So they have somebody lead it because I guess they feel a little uncomfortable to just go ahead and read and discuss things. So this is a very important aspect of what it means to have love. And it's the love of the community in the end. And in Yiddishkeit, the love of the community revolves in the end around Torah. You have to find something that touches you. Okay. Then, this love between husband and wife also has a more general aspect to it. Really, because it also extends to love between two people that are not related. So its greatest generalization is Ahavat Yisrael. It's just to love the other Jews. And this is emotional love. All these community types of things, they're intellectual in the end. They're intellectual love. They come from the intellectual powers. Can people get together and discuss cooking? Yes, they can. But they'll discuss it intellectually. Meaning, it won't be emotional. Why? Because if it's emotional, what's going to happen? You cannot beat an egg that way. If you leave it in that, it'll blow up. You can't get emotions into a community. You have to do it from above. There's a thing I just heard this Shabbos, that the previous Rav of Kfar Chabad, Gorelik, so he came to the Rebbe in 1953. The guy said it was 1953. And he came to the Rebbe in 1770, and he gave him a doch, gave him an accounting of everybody in the Kfar, in Kfar Chabad, because he's the Rav of the Kfar. So about a number of people, he had to say bad things, and he thought it was okay because his responsibility is to ensure that everybody. He needs to ask the Rebbe what to do. So the Rebbe heard, he didn't stop him. He said at the end, he said, so everything was very good, but one thing you have to remember. A Rav can't be under, he has to be above. If you're the leader of a community, you can't be under them, you have to be above them. What does that mean? You can't look at the negative things. Whatever the negative things are, just ignore them. It's the same thing is true in a family also, by the way. That you can't belabor the negative. You can't put your stress there. You always have to be like with your outlook above. Where are we going? What's our purpose? What are we trying to do? And if somebody is, faking it, not doing it right, whatever, he's got all these ones. I'm not saying don't treat the problems personally and whatever, but as the leader, that's not what you show. That's not what you... Children and people and a community need to feel that the person who's in charge sees the best in everybody. That's what they need to feel. So that's why in the end this is called an intellectual love when it comes to the community. But when it comes to to family, not to family, to husband and wife, and relationships with other Jews, there, as just as a relationship, not a community, there has to be emotion. You have to add emotion into the mix. That's why Ahavat Yisrael is already emotional love. It's like the love between husband and wife and between good friends.
Is that in counseling as well, if we have a client?
So what do you... Great question. So what do you, when... The love between a counselor and... which type is it?
I think it has to be, well, it seems obviously communal, but I've had an experience it has to be emotional. No, it has to be above. It has to be both. No, theoretically it's above, but...
So you have to care for the person. Personally, you have to care for them. But as a counselor, it has to be intellectual.
How does that ever work out?
It has to be that again, like we said, you have to believe that this person, regardless of what all the problems are, I have to see the divine in him. I have to see the higher self in him. I have to see that he has all the potential. So when people came to the Rebbe, even though he heard everything, but he never looked at the person and said, You're right. You're held back by A, B, C, and D. He didn't even say, even though the person was, and it was clear. Here's where you're going. This is where you want to head. To get there, you might need to do a few things. But first of all, where's my sight set? It's set into your higher self. I'm not dealing with the problems. It's like you can't get a person out of quicksand if you go under them. You have to pull them from above. If you try to go under them, you'll sink faster than they will. Same thing with somebody who's drowning in water. Same thing. You have to be above them all the time. So that's like the thing here. But when it comes to being a good friend, it has to be emotional. If I don't feel that you have emotions for me, so why would I want to be your friend? If it's just an intellectual connection, okay. What do you want to be, my rabbi, my student? What do you want to be? You want to be students together somewhere? Okay, but to be a friend, a person has to feel that you have emotions, you have feelings for them, that you enjoy them, that you love them as they are. That's where it has to be. So it doesn't mean what. A mashpia is more like a counselor. It's more like an intellectual love. I said at the personal level you certainly care, but in the interaction, the revealed interaction, you're like the Rav here. You're like it's more intellectual.
But for the student, it's not. For the person,
no, it's
person
also
that's going to the
intellectual.
mashpia, it's not just
Why?
emotional.
No, it's not emotional at all.
It's not just intellectual.
Like I said, because the word love is involved in all these interactions, and we associate immediately love with emotions, so you might want to say that. What we're saying is that the main thing that's happening is dafka intellectual. What I love about him is not just spending time with him, it's what he tells me. He's telling me something that I chap, that I makes a difference for me. It's not just that somebody is accepting me unconditionally, and that's like emotional love. That's not what it. Maybe it's not unconditionally, but that somebody loves me in an emotional way. It's not that I come and he just hugs me and because of that I feel all better. There are people like that. The moment that you come, they hug you and you feel, wow, I'm so loved and so on. But the question is, what can you take away afterwards? What's the difference? The difference is, it's like Chabad and Hasidus from Poland. That the Polish Chassid, the Rebbe gives him a lot of love, but the moment that he's far away, it's not just love, he gives him, as we'll see, he opens up all his entire emotional world. But it's only open for the time that he's with the Rebbe. But when he goes away, it closes up again. But with Chabad, the idea was, I'm not going to give you any emotional love. You don't get any love from me, or at least not in the sense of emotional love. But what you're getting from me is a ton of intellectual love. And what that causes is that you can open your own emotions. You can see from that how it can. So when we're talking about muskar, like avat Torah, this intellectual love, it gives birth to a lot of emotions afterwards.
We've been in discussion with Miriam when we go over in the process as a counselor using the Hachna Havdalah. So it would seem that from the therapist's point of view, perhaps the emotional part is the Hachna.
Right.
But then we have
agree.
to do
I agree 100%.
and separate ourselves from the emotional drama to access in ourselves that space. To give them the emotional space.
So you can say, I thought you were going to say something else. So if you're saying that, so even at the beginning, I have to have some achna'ah myself.
Absolutely, no, we have to.
And my achna'ah here is more not to judge. That's that. So, okay.
And then the Havdalah from our point of view is we have to step away and go to that higher place. That's what we've been learning and
Okay. Say, when it comes to the love between parents and children, the nehi, the netzachot yesod, the habitual behavioral love between parents and children and siblings. So that type of habitual, natural love, in the end you would call it natural. Natural love, when you generalize it, that becomes the love for the land of Israel, for Eretz Yisrael. It's a natural love, meaning it's like the same thing that even after 2,000 years, regardless of where people were and how they were, they knew that they loved the land of Israel. They didn't know why. They'd never seen it. They don't know. It's a terrible place. When you actually go there, there's nothing. There's no Starbucks. What is this place? But I love it. I don't know why. Every day I say, I don't know so when I get there, you actually see, maybe I don't. It's exactly like with your siblings, or with parents and children. I want them to come so much. I want them. They actually come from yeshiva. No, you can go back. Right? That's the whole joke that when the children with the Einiklach, with the grandchildren, they come. So you're so happy, you're so well, they finally came. Then when they leave, I am chayim. Finally. But that's natural love. That it doesn't change the next time. You don't say, "No, I've been through that, been there, done that." You say, "But I want to see them again." The same thing with your siblings. On the one hand, when we actually are together after half an hour, we have nothing to talk about because I'm in one world, they're in another world. But even though, nonetheless, there can't be such a thing that they'll have a simcha and I won't come. The thought can't even cross my mind. That's not even an option. Why? Because there's something natural. That's the type of, when you generalize that love, you get what it means, the love for the land of Israel. Because of this, you also understand something more, which is that the whole discussion of Eretz Yisrael and Chassidus is that here, the mitzvos are not more holy, which is the way people think about it normally, but rather they're more natural. Natural doesn't mean that they're natural because, I don't know, you put tefillin on and you don't sweat in Israel, and in America you do. It's the opposite. It's much more difficult. it's natural in the sense that it slowly just becomes a pattern, something that you do naturally, without thinking about it twice. That's really, it's called Yiddish Natur, it's called in Yiddish. It's a Jewish nature. That you can pick up in Eretz Yisrael, or you can machdo Eretz Yisrael, wherever you are. But you have to connect to Eretz Yisrael to understand that. The natural aspect of what it means to be a Jew, meaning that it's just natural. It's not, I'm not commanded to do this. I just do it in the same way that I brush my teeth, because that's how I do things. I wake up in the morning, I brush my teeth. Why? Because I've been doing it for 10 years this way. I don't know, 20 years, 50 years. I don't have any teeth left, I still trying to brush my teeth. Okay? That's natural. And that's the extension, it's the generalization of the natural love that exists between family members. Okay?
And between husband and wife, it's not a natural.
It's emotional. It's what we call emotional. The generalization is love of all of Am Yisrael. And between a Rav and a Talmud, and between the Talmidim themselves, that's intellectual, and the generalization is love of Torah. And then we have, like we said, on top and on bottom, there are two different relationships between us and Hashem. One is where He's the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and we're Am Yisrael, His bride. In this sense, it's a little bit like husband and wife. And in the Malchus, it's that He's our king and we're His people, which is different type of love. But like we said, in the end, where I feel love here doesn't have 13 parts to it, right? It's just one thing, whatever this thing is. So you can't really have love in one area and say, well, all the other areas it won't extend into, or the opposite. You can't say, well, I really, really love my wife, but it doesn't spill over into our children, or it doesn't spill over into, right, that would be from the emotional into the habitual. Or I really love my wife, but I don't love Torah. It's a very deep saying. It's saying that you can't really love your spouse unless you also love Torah. Because you only have one love. That's the Bob Marley song, no? One love? We're going to have a lot of songs here in this, discussing this, because half the songs in the world are about love. The other half are also about love, but from the other side, right? most of the music.
The difference when my husband started studying Torah.
Yeah.
How the love did change.
Yeah.
I came in from a different place.
Yeah. And interestingly, it doesn't matter whether you're the one who's learning or not. It could be the other person. Why? I don't know. But it's saying here that all of the love is one faculty in the end. It's just it expresses itself in all these different ways.
I mean, we know people that one spouse is religious and the other isn't, and they really do love their spouse from a deep love. So how could you reconcile that?
Sadly, they could love a ton more. They've only developed their love to a certain point. That's what I'm saying. That if you want to fully develop it, you have to find all the modes of expression. And then
That's not fair, though.
What?
You can't force someone to find the same love for God that they have.
Sada, yes. I'm betting that the fact that they love each other, even though one is from and one isn't, is because they do share some other love, which might be love of Hashem, or it might be love of the Jewish people. The pioneers that came to Eretz Yisrael, there's a lot of great love stories. So where did that love, strengthen itself? What is it? Off land of Israel and the Jewish people. There's no, that's a topic in of itself. There's a lot to discuss about this Partzuf, and just from this you can get a lot of information even before we get into it. So let's start seeing this. So he called this the power of love because I think that the very first chapter is only, yes, it is. It's only the first two paragraphs here. So clearly, when Avram Aryeh Trugman, when Rabbi Trugman translated this, he didn't translate. But rather, he sat with the Rav and he gave him shiurim on this. So it would be interesting, he gave him classes on it. So it would be interesting to figure out if he has these taped somewhere. But I have no no recordings at all of Rabbi Ginsburg teaching any of this. So the only thing I have to go on is what he wrote.
You're talking about 10 years ago.
No, this is at least 35 years
There's
ago.
no tapes.
Yeah, at least 35 years ago. This he wrote when he was in his 30s, the Rav, and I know that they've known each other for about 35 years. He said this was the first thing that they worked on, and then they worked on the Hebrew letters. But you can check with him if that's the right order. At least that's what I remember. So does everybody have a copy? Probably not. I
No,
didn't know.
we need some more.
No, I don't have any more. So
Oh, can we go next one?
you want to make some more?
Why not? Do you want me to or not?
Read together now, and whoever doesn't have, so you know. And then at the end of the class, you can photocopy if other people want. Okay. So we call this the power of love, even though the first chapter here is called 13 Loves. Why? Because it's just about the very beginning, the first few paragraphs, which discuss what is love as a faculty, like just as a faculty in the heart. What does it do? What is it able to do? Okay. So when perceived, so now I'm reading from the text. When perceived of in its most literal sense, love is one of a number of particular powers of the soul, manifest specifically through the emotions. That's how we usually think about love, like we said. That because we think it's emotional, so we understand that when you say love, it's the experience of chesed. And chesed is just one of the sfirot. So there's a lot of other sfirot also. What's so important about love? But when defined, though, in its broadest sense, love is the light and spirit of life that brings all states of potential to actuality. Okay?
Say it again. Love is state of life.
Love, in its broadest sense, is the faculty, it's the power that brings all states of potential to actuality. It's what moves things from potential to actuality. The first thing that you associate with love and loving kindness, with chesed, is what's the first thing supposedly you're supposed to think of? Because Kabbalah is associative, right? Because it is associative. So what goes together with, what's the metal that goes with chesed? Which metal?
Nettle?
Cold.
Silver.
Silver.
Why? Because how do you say silver in Hebrew? Kesef. Kesef means to yearn for something. And gvura is fire, right? What's fiery? What's red? Gold. The good gold, paz it's called, is the gold that's red. In fact, you can't really even get it today. That it's gold that's been, I think it's a different type, it's not exactly, it's a different isotope, I think. In any case, but there's also, apart from a metal, so there's an element. Which element? We said, if fire is yirah, so what's loving kindness? Water. What do we know about water? Well, that we also know. But what about from actuality, from potential to actual? Then all life on earth depends on what? On water. All life. That's what he says here. That all, it's the light and spirit of life. If there's no water, there's nothing. There's no life. So when you translate this into the human, when I look at the planet, it's the water. When I look at the psyche, it's love. If a person doesn't have love, if love is not flowing, that's what we do, it flows. Fear doesn't flow. Fear stops. It's not going anywhere. So if there's no love flowing from my heart, then there's no life, period. Nothing around me is alive, and even I myself am not alive.
So you can't live.
Right? There's no life without it. That's why, even in English, it's not clear, I don't know why, it's not so clear, but why is life and love, why are they almost the same word? In Yiddish, it's mamish, how do you say? Lieb. Lieb is life. And how do you say to love? It's the same word. Mamish is the same word. It's spelled a little bit differently, but it's mamish the same word. So you can't have life without love. In anything around you. It's the essential ingredient that makes everything grow. So it's right. It's just one of the forces of the psyche, but in the end, it's the most central.
You know, died of a broken heart.
Okay, if you don't have it, you die. The broken heart here is because
Strong.
it's dramatic. But really what it means is that you have no love for others. Not that others don't. It's also true that if others don't love you, you can. But still, even what do you mean others don't love you? Even if other loves are lacking, you don't have an avenue for expressing some of these forms of love. You always have the most important, which is the one on top and on bottom, which is the love for Hashem. So that always exists. If you don't love Hashem, what is life about? Life is missing its essential ingredient. Because in the end, as much as you love other people, nobody loves you the way that Hashem loves you. And there's nothing in the world that you can love more than you can love Hashem. Also, even the Torah is not the same as Hashem. So there's a simple concept of this in creation, that we say that the first day of creation goes with all the other days. Yoma de'azilim kulu yamin. That's how the Zohar says it. The first day is a day that goes with all the others. What does it mean to say? That if the light in the first day wouldn't continue into the next 5 days and into Shabbos, there would be no more days. All the days are the because what do you mean by days? If you talk about it just in general, there is light and there's darkness, and there has to be light in order to define a day to begin with. I'm not talking about the sun. The sun is something else. There has to be light and there has to be darkness. That's how Hashem defined the first day. When it was light and it was dark, it was one day altogether. Light and darkness together make one day. So if there's no light, if there's no love, there's no time, there's no development, there's nothing. None of the other days would exist. So everything depends on what happened the first day, since there are 7 days of creation, 6 days in Shabbat, so they correspond to the Sfirot, the emotional Sfirot. So they start with Chesed, all the way to Malchut. Shabbos is Malchut. So Chesed is love. So love goes with all the other days of creation. Love permeates, it accompanies all the other days. Without that, it wouldn't work. In this sense, love is not only a particular quality of the soul, but a general power present in the full gamut of intellectual, emotional, and innate, what I call natural or habitual properties of the human psyche. This light of love is the light of the Holy One, blessed be He. I hate that phrase, but here you have to say it because it's the acronym, it's the initials. This is from Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev. I don't know if he made it up, but in his book he never calls Hashem just Hashem. Or he never says the light of the infinite, like it says in Kabbalah books or a lot of in Chassidus, Or Ein Sof. We'll say Or HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's basically what he's about. He's about loving people. So even for him, love itself is a name, it's an initial for Hashem. Or HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ahava. Right? Or is Aleph, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hey Bet Hey, Ahava. So how does Hashem reveal Himself? What does it mean? What does light mean? Light here in this sense is how Hashem reveals Himself. How does He reveal Himself? Through love. That's what He is. So this light of love is the light of Hashem, whose impetus to create the world and the means He used to do so is love. What do we mean that the means He used to do so? How do we know? I don't know if He says this here. He probably says it somewhere, but I'll say it now. How do we know that Hashem created the world with love? So first of all, there's a pasuk that we say in Tehillim, Olam Chesed Yibaneh. The world is created through Chesed, through love. But there's something even deeper. There's a beautiful remez, a beautiful illusion that the sages give in the Gemara, that the world was created with Avraham. Because it says, these ele toldot hashamayim va'aretz behi bar'am. These are the chronicles of the heavens and the earth when they were created. When they were created is one word in Hebrew, behi bar'am. So it's bet, hey, bet, reish, aleph, mem. And this permutes to spell Be'avraham. You can read it Behi Bara'am. It's also Be'avraham. What is Avram? Avram is love. So the whole world was created with love. This is an incredible illusion. Therein lies the secret of light being the initial creative act of the first day of creation. Because light is love, by definition, the light of Hashem. Thus, love is a creative force or flow of energy from God to reality. As it says, the world is built through loving kindness. That's what we just mentioned. Olam chesed yibaneh. The lack of love is, by analogy, a state of darkness, with all that the image of darkness and void, melancholy and depression represent. In the ancient the Galenic medicine, so there are 4 humors. And there's the black humor. Bile is the yellow. Bilirubin, which is yellow. That's why you become yellow when the bile acts up. The melancholy comes from the pancreas. Comes from the lavlav. It's in Hebrew. And it's very interesting because in Galenic medicine, this was also related to laughter. When I say something is melavliv, or melabiv, even more, what I'm saying is that it's very alive. Melavliv, like livluv, like we have in the Oshanos, right? In the Aravot that we take on Oshana Rabbah, it writes on it, im livluv. Like that they have this little bit of, it's more alive, it looks more alive. Okay. Livluv. The other ones don't have livluv, even though the lulav is lo lev, and each one has some aspect of it. But the Aravot, it's called livluv. So it's like a deeper heart, but so it's associated with laughter also. That's the interesting thing, that the pancreas is also associated with laughter. How does it become melancholy? That there's too much.
We cry if we laugh too much.
Okay, maybe. The understanding there in Greece was that that there are two types of drama. It's either a comedy or a tragedy, and really they're just two sides of the same coin. They both come from the same place. The pancreas is like where you do drama. If you do it well, it's comedy. You overdo it, becomes tragic. Okay? Even comedy taken to the end. What was this? This was the idea that you can't take the world too seriously. I mean, you can't be too attached to things. Comedy is when you're able to laugh at yourself. You're able to laugh at what you see. I mean, it's not so serious. It's not so. It's not like.
We discussed last week. Abraham was laughing. So from
Okay.
him on him.
Okay. So, but what happens when you start taking things they mean nothing at all? That's melancholy. It's like you go from this state of being light and don't take it too seriously to the point of cynicism. That's what they called it. Melancholy was really a cynic. Now, interestingly, in Greece, like Marcus Aurelius, he's the most famous cynic of all. You can read his memoirs. He's one of the few people that actually wrote a journal in the ancient world. And he's a very deep philosopher, Marcus Aurelius, even though he was an emperor, and wasn't, from what I remember, he didn't connect with our people. Sure. Some more black melancholy stuff. So a cynic is bitter. It becomes bitter. So, but they held that there was good cynicism. Good cynicism, melancholy. This is very interesting. I'm telling you this because it's a very important thing to know about people. That they used to connect it with philosophy. you can't be a good thinker, a good philosopher. You can't think about the world if you're too attached to it. So you have to take a step back. How do you take a step back? You become cynical. Or the other way of calling this, which is how it's called in religions, right? The Romans, the philosophers didn't like religion too much. But in religions, it's called being a nazir, being an ascetic. An ascetic is somebody who pushes away from... You have to be melancholy for that. That's what it means. It means that I don't want to connect too much to the world. So the good form that's good for everybody, that's laughter. And that also, it comes from the levlav, from the pancreas. You have to laugh.
You also need some distance to be
Can, that's what I'm saying. You have to take a step back in order to be able to laugh. You can't be too attached to it. If somebody comes and he laughs at you, and you take yourself to meetings too attached to yourself, they come and laughs at your car, I don't know, whatever there is to car, or he laughs at your book, and you can't take a joke. It means that, I'm so attached that this is the most important thing since the Tanakh was written. So you have to be able to take a step back. If you go too far back, then you become melancholy. And if you go even further, you become depressed. Because nothing has meaning. It's all the same spectrum. It's very important to know this. We never did a class on Galenic medicine. Because Galen was the author of the most important text in the ancient world that everybody studied. But the four humors. It's the four humors and four qualities, which are in between the humors, or the humors are in between the qualities, depending on how you look at it. A lot of Sefer Yitzhak is built on the same principles. There's a whole, Jews like to say that we invented it, not them. It's usually not that we invented, but that we take it and we make it right. Meaning that the way that they said it, they looked at experience and they said it however they said it. We said it after looking, how does this fit into the Torah, and then it goes through some kind of transformation. So one of the most important transformations is that we don't accept cynics and we don't accept ascetics. For them, that was, like Marcus Aurelius, a cynic is not a bad thing. It's the only way to think about the world. You have to be cynical. A letz is a cynic. Like when we say no leitzanut, like Reb Nachman, everything but leitzanut, what we're saying is anything but melancholy. Anything but this detachment from things as if they don't mean anything. That I don't accept. They always have meaning. If Hashem put it here, it has meaning. Don't take yourself too seriously. Be able to laugh at it. But it turns out that the black humor is the opposite of the heart, of the red humor. The red humor here is what flows through. That's the life force in the body. It's the heart. So they have the same name even. Lev and Lavlav. It's almost like you can't even tell the difference. But one is the heart, it's life, and the other, if it becomes too strong, again, it's detachment from life. It's taking a step back from it. And if it becomes too strong, it becomes depression. Nothing interests me anymore. Nothing is serious. Nothing is worthwhile. Nothing is good, and so on and so forth. And you don't create anything. That's the main thing in depression. But also, the thing about a thinker, what's a thinker? A thinker is a strange person. The person who doesn't do anything. What do you create? I ask you at the end of the day, so what did you make today? And imagine in the ancient world where everybody has to work and do physical labor, and this guy is sitting on a rock and thinking. So how many trees did you plant today? None. So what are you going to eat tomorrow? I don't know. I don't care. He had to be that way. So usually they had to find a patron, somebody who would support them until they can. So the Torah doesn't accept that. You can't take a step back from life and not create anything. What are you talking about? The purpose of Asher B'Elokim La'asot. You have to do. You can't. So we don't accept this whole theory that the further away you step from it, no. So the Rebbe, like for instance, exactly. Who said? So what's the opposite of that? That the Rebbe says, whatever you learned. It's a shita in Chabad. Whatever. What's the uvechen? What practically comes out of this? You have to ask, how did this practically change something? Reb Chaim of Volozhin was the same way. He said to his students, every time you learn and you have a chiddush, he had an incredible shita that he said, If you have a chiddush and you have a new minhag that comes out of it, or some new hanaga that would come out of it, a new v'chein, do it, even though it doesn't say so in Shulchan Aruch. He wanted people to be practical.
What if it's just in your relationships?
What?
It doesn't it usually be in your relationships?
It could be in your relationships, but it should be something that you do, not something that you say, yeah, I have a new way of thinking about this. Very nice that you have a new way, but
No.
do something. Okay? Do something. It has to be something physical that you can do. That's why, I always tell you the story that after I got married, my wife says, you say you love me, but you don't do anything about it. So do something. Do the dishes. Dishes is now I know that you love me. If you don't do the dishes, how do I know that you love you? So you say you feel emotion. Well, I can see emotion. I can't see emotion. I have no special glasses. I can see emotion. You hug somebody. That's like a little bit of doing something. You kiss somebody. It's even more. But you really want to show me that you love me, so you do the dishes. What? Take the garbage out. You don't like that. You do like it. I'm saying.
Why is the word uvachein the word that shows on making it
I
practical?
don't know.
It means therefore, literally?
No, it means like you could say Paul layoitze. That's how you would say it in earlier writings. Uvachein is, I don't know, it just means it. Why he chose this one and not another one? Probably because it's shorter and it's just an easier way of saying it. I don't know if there's something deeper behind it. Probably if you would ask the Rebbe, he would give you a whole 10 hours worth on why Uvachein is there's probably a pasuk somewhere where that becomes the most important thing, but I can't think of anything like that. Ken, we said so one thing here is Bechein is equal to 72 chesed. That we learned in the Shira before Rosh Hashanah, if you remember, that they're all chasadim, all the 4 becheins there.
So when we mentioned Megillat Esther,
Right, but it's supposed to be parallel.
she comes to
Good. Okay, man was created in the image of God. So that's a little bit about darkness, melancholy, depression, how they all connect to one another. And they all mean a lack of love, really. It's darkness. It's the black humor. So what time is it? Just because I have to make it to another... Man who's created in the image of God is commanded to imitate God. Just as God is merciful, so too should you be merciful. The creation of the world, something from nothing, the general thing, what is man supposed to be? Small Hashem, Ani Amarti Elokim Atem. It should be an act in the confines of his life as God would act in the confines of creation. So the creation of the world was made something from nothing through the impetus of love, meaning love transforms nothingness into something. It takes the potential and turns it into something actual. So this teaches us the secret of bringing hidden potential to fruition. Chokhmah, now what we have to understand here is that love didn't come out of nowhere. It's true that it's in and of itself, it's this incredible force that does everything, but everything has a source. Everything has if you want, the divine above its head. So who's sitting on top of love? Who's on top of love? We even say this, Elokei Avram. If Avram is love, so who's Elokei Avram?
Hashem.
Okay, what aspect of Hashem? No, he's Chesed. What's above Chesed?
And kindness.
Chokhmah. The way he experiences Hashem, is that Hashem is Chokhmah. Okay? It's like when you say, how did Yitzchak experience Hashem? So his own experience was Gvura, but what did he see Hashem? It was Binah. Yaakov, he's Tiferet. Who's Elokei Yaakov? Who? Dat. And who's Dat? That's what we say, that Moshe milego, v'Yaakov milevar. Moshe on the inside, Moshe is Dat, and Yaakov on the outside. It's also like, what is more internal than love? What is a deeper source from which love comes out? There's a source for it. So for love, it's from Chokhmah. Kulam bechokhmah asita. You created everything. There's a different pasuk that says you created everything with wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Wisdom is something coming out of nothing. It is the actual power of something coming out of nothing. Because how do we describe wisdom? It's like a lightning strike. It's like there was nothing there, and suddenly, boom, there's light. The problem with wisdom is that it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. It comes, it's like a spark of lightning, and it ends. And when it ends, it's over. That's it. But you have to have that spark of lightning in order to foster love, in order to create love. If you don't have that wisdom, so what is wisdom? Wisdom is the sense of nothingness in the nefesh. It's a sense of self-nullification. So let's see how this works. So he says here, Chokhmah, the first of the intellectual powers of the soul, manifests itself as flashes of insight and lightning consciousness. These instantaneous, or one-time lightning bolts, are in a state of pure potential in need of development. It's the first something coming out of nothing. So it's not exactly that love is something that takes something out of nothing and brings it into... It's not takes nothingness and brings it into somethingness. It's more that it needs to take the seed and make it grow. Because that's what water really does. Water doesn't create the seed. But once there's a seed, something that can't yet develop, it makes it develop. It opens up the potential that's in it. So the same thing in the self-nullification, there's no growth yet. You can't just have bittul, and from this you'll come to change the world. Okay? What changes the world is love. But if you have no self-nullification, there's no seed that love can work on. So at the source of all expression of love that you have, there has to be some seed of self-nullification. It's a good book, no?
Yes, yes.
I think it's a great book.
You have to be more enthusiastic.
No, nobody here's awake.
We're awake. We're comprehending it.
Right.
It's a little, heavy.
It's because Rav is not well.
Thank
That's why
you.
we feel it.
Okay. I thought it was a book. The word Chokhmah, let's read these two sentences again. So, the creation of the world, something from nothing, through the impetus of love, teaches us the secret of bringing hidden potential to fruition. And it starts with Chokhmah, the first of the intellectual powers of the soul, which manifests itself as flashes of insight and lightning consciousness. Those are seeds, and they come through our self-nullification. And these instantaneous lightning bolts, remember, I know but not everybody here was in those classes. We had a long series of classes about the senses of the soul. We said that there are these talents that not the wisdom down here, but the wisdom in the crown has. Not the wisdom here. The wisdom here is just a feeling of self-nullification. The wisdom in the crown is where all our talents are hidden. It's called chokhmastima, the concealed wisdom. So we said, how do you bring it down? For instance, talents there are mathematics, and knowing how to work with animals, natural wisdom, and music, and kinesiology, meaning the person has a dance, and all these things are related to the body. And there's also language. All these things are talents. And we said that how do you bring them down? That you have to turn the faucet on. The way that you turn the faucet on is with the revealed wisdom. The revealed wisdom is self-nullification. When you have self-nullification, a drop, just one drop of these higher talents comes down. But then you have to actually love what you're doing. Just because you have a talent makes it all possible. But you also have to actually go and flow, go and do something. There has to be some kind. So the love will take that drop and make it sprout, make it develop into something alive. So you have to keep having flashes of self-nullification. You can't do in this world, there is no permanent state of self-nullification that doesn't exist. In this world, nullification